Okay. Welcome to Studio Cafe, everybody. Thanks for coming out for the sensational artist, Birdie Knox-Rose. And this is her solo show, I Love You More Than You Know. I hope if everyone's okay, we'll be recording. It's just facing Birdie and I, just for archival purposes. And I'll go through all of the questions, and then we'll save some time at the end if anyone else has any questions. Thanks. Okay, Birdie. So, this is your first solo show since you were 18. Can you tell me more about the first one and the differences with this show and how your art has evolved since then?
My first solo show was I called Grant, where at the time I was making these sculptures inside of old vintage suitcases, and I would interview people, and I had a set. I can't remember how many there were, but I had a set number of questions that I asked everybody every time I did an interview, and it was sort of designed to get an overview of that person's life and where they're at, what they like, who they are, and then I would make a inner portrait of that person to the best of my ability inside of the suitcase. And the idea was that it was like that person's baggage. I started by doing one of myself at a time when I had moved out of my dad's house as a teenager. I think it was like a really good way for me to sort of process that and like create like an end of a chapter sort of thing. And I don't know. I think it was just so fun to do that I wanted to continue doing that, and I got a grant, and I made 3 portraits of 3 different people, and that was what the show was. And I had all of the questions out on the wall, and they weren't anonymous, but they were anonymous to the people coming to see the show. It was just, the guy had very vague amounts of information about each person, and they were obviously very different pieces.
Yeah, so do you feel, as you've gotten older and your art has shifted, do you feel that like now it's more vulnerable and you're more forthcoming to kind of talk about what some of the art is in your storytelling?
I don't know that I'm more forthcoming to talk about it, but I do think I have thought more about why I make the things that I do.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
Yep. So it was kind of like maybe in the earlier days it was more like a cathartic act. Just kind of
I think it was more, like subconsciously processing things and then producing a thing, and then over time I thought about it a bit more and then more consciously made similar stuff.
Gotcha.
At the time when I started those suitcases, that was like when I started making art again as a teenager, because I had made art obviously as a kid, but I had stopped making anything that was super personal and outside of school for a bit, and then that suitcase project was the first step back into that. Yeah, and that was the first thing where I think I was really thinking about what I wanted to include and why, and what I wanted people to feel from it. But then I started making more abject stuff, and I think that was coming from a lot of probably dark emotions and feelings, but not consciously. I wasn't this is what the feeling I want to get across, but I through unpacking my art, especially in art school for the year that I was there, I think I learned more why I make the things that I do.
Gotcha.
And yeah, it's definitely getting farther from each thing. I think more about it, even if I knew why I did it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have the pleasure of knowing kind of your history with art in general. But could we talk a little bit more about um, how long you've been making art and what were some of the things that inspired you as a child?
I wrote about this in my article, but when I was a kid, I made, well, the first like thing I remember like art-wise being excited about was when I was gifted this like making saw creatures book, and I thought that that was so cool because I was really into ugly dolls. I mean that's been like redone in recent years, but like the original ugly dolls, I was like very into those, and I liked that whole world that those creatures inhabited. And the saw creatures book that I was gifted was like a way to like sort of build your own monster, and use like materials that you already had, like socks. And so that I think was the initial thing that got me excited about like really making my own stuff. Because I definitely like drew as a kid, but I don't think I was ever super excited by that. And so when I realized that you could like create your own toy essentially, and like play with it and make it do things, so I was very excited.
Yeah, and so at what point did you learn how to assemble putting those dolls together? Like, did you learn how to sew with the needle, use the sewing machine? Like, how did you go about putting those dolls together?
I don't know. I mean, the book had like a pretty step-by-step guide. Like the doll that's like right behind her head is like me attempting to follow a tutorial as like I don't know exactly how old I was. I think if I did it probably when I was like 5 or 6, but
That's awesome.
so that book had a how-to to make those, and I think it had stuff similar, just like how to thread the needle. But I also did like learn through. I went to begrudgingly. My dad put me. I didn't want to, but he put me in extended day at school, and one of the initial people that was there running it would teach kids to sew. And I remember learning stuff from her. And then I do the that guy with your head Vincenzo I made when I was like 7 or 8, I think, and he was the first piece I remember making on a sewing machine.
That's really impressive.
And one of my stepmom at the time taught me how to do that.
Well, it seems like even from like a clearly young age, you've had a very vivid imagination, like your own concept of like color theory that you kind of see reflected through the whole series. And in conjunction with this show titled I Love You More Than You Know, you state that this is partly a love letter to your younger self. Can you explain how she's honored and represented in the show and in your later work?
Well, I think that generally, like I said, my art hasn't. I think my art has gotten better and like shifted in like my technical ability and how I can follow through with an idea. But I think generally still in processing and thinking about the same things that I was as a kid, with just like more knowledge and like being able to look back. And I think a lot of the like trauma and stuff that I process in my stuff is, I think her being able to see how far I've come would be pretty revolutionary. But also I think it would just be special for her to be able to come into this space and like see her own art and know that she.
Yeah, so you had these ideas, and now that you're older, you have all of this experience of creating and going through those growing pains of maybe making stuff that wasn't as executed as you wanted to, but now you have all of these skills in your tool belt that you can really kind of put that idea onto. Yeah, it's really cool. Which pieces would you say that you see it the most in today?
Like stuff I've made recently. Well, really, I think the dolls. Because I remember as a kid, I would create full stories with them, and I think like the doll. I guess the dolls just in conjunction with the more community stuff. I think it's just building upon that same world and like not letting go to that like excitement and that innocence that I had and like yeah. That's what I would say. But I also have like little things that were obviously the stuff that I made when I was a kid, but like especially in the dollhouse there's like things that were mine as a little kid that I just still had and I just sort of
I think it's really interesting that you say like you see a lot of your younger self in the dolls. There's something interesting, watching you actually like assemble a body. You know what I mean? Like you're actually physically creating this like entity that's not necessarily just a drawing or just a painting or just writing a poem. There's something about like you are hand selecting all of these different pieces and putting together like a particular character or creature. I think that's really interesting.
yeah, I really like being able to see the different sort of competing components together. Because that's something that I also think a lot about with like the abject stuff is like sort of the memory that a body has and like using that to depict trauma is an interesting thing. And I think with the dolls and like being able to like select the limbs and the facial features and what have you, it's a cool way to sort of think about building a character. Yeah.
Do you ever, like when you're making a doll now, do you ever kind of like really associate like a particular piece that's like, this kind of reminds me of a particular memory or like a certain joy or a certain like pain?
Do the limbs, like do the specific components?
Any of like the particular, like some of these ones you've made later, it's really interesting that you use like really tiny legs, maybe a lobster claw, and some of the other dolls, like you look at some of these over here, it's just really interesting. I wonder if you ever like select a particular piece or you ever like processing a particular event or a memory or a feeling where you're trying to get back to a certain place.
Sometimes I think the more what I think about is the way that they're attached.
Gotcha.
And like where they're attached on the body. Like sometimes they have like a face in their tummy.
Yep.
Or like, I use band-aids a lot to like, sort of, give a sense of like how that attachment occurred. If that makes sense. Almost like it's an injury or something that's like still healing.
Yeah.
That it either like depicts growth or it depicts healing or it depicts injury. So I think about that part of it more than I think about the pieces, I guess. Though the pieces still matter, but
It's more about the process of like how they're attached.
Yeah.
And like where you place
Yeah.
certain things. Yeah. That's right.
But I do also, I think I like the like different types of limbs and like the size. I guess the size too is also a thing.
Yeah.
Like I had this dream as a kid that I would get all the time when I was sick, where I would have like when I would have like a fever. I had this bizarre dream where there would be like really big things crushing really little things, and oftentimes they were like really like bodily or whatever. And so I think that type of size disparity is also interesting to me, and also like I don't know, thinking about how the thing would move and like walk on the feet and
Or yeah, there's like almost like a sense of like vulnerability and like fragility.
yeah.
The thought of like this kind of semi bigger creature trying to walk on these tiny limbs. It's
Yeah.
like
And
how
they're
is
like
that even
little babies.
yeah. It's like how is it even possible? Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. To kind of pivot back to more of your title of your show and from your artist statement, you also mentioned that the show is a love letter to the people you've loved and have loved in your life. Can you talk more about your process in that and some of the pieces in particular that you see some of those folks?
Well, I think a lot of my art is like processing stuff that I've been through, or my love for the people in my life, whether that's like a complicated relationship or not. Like, the dollhouse has piece of my dad's phone in it, and he was not a great person in my life. And I think like figuring out how to process that feeling and that love for somebody that wasn't a good person, but still putting that feeling somewhere. Yeah. So figuring out a place to put a feeling or process a feeling that maybe you don't know how to vocalize, or you literally can't tell the person, or there isn't an end place for that to come to fruition. But also there's like little pieces that people have given me, or like I relate to the person hidden.
Yeah, and I mean some of even some of your encaustic paintings, you have little bits of things that like maybe somebody looking on the surface wouldn't quite know that there's like even a story there, which I think is really interesting. Are there any like particular that you'd like to talk about or share about?
This piece. Thanks, baby. Yeah. This piece was the like scribbly bits and the little square of like a squiggle was drawings that were given to me by kids at one of my last jobs, and the two kids that those drawings are from, the specific experience that I had with them was so special and intense, and like it was just so bizarre to me that like I shared that moment with them at that time, and they'll probably never think about me or the instance again, but I thought like immortalizing their thing in the wax, and adding my own touch to it was a cool way to sort of process the
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of like dichotomy that's happening with that piece in particular, because you have somewhat of like happy images of what you would think about the world, like the sun, being this warm, happy thing, and a home, right? but yet you have these kind of more subdued, darker colors in this like swirling pattern, this kind of mix in the wax. It kind of makes you think of like, you know, holding joy and grief all at the same time.
Yeah, the job that I had where I met the kids was at a home shelter, and yeah, I feel like a lot of times something I think about in my art is home and what that means and who it can be with and how you create that. And like I took that really seriously at my job, and thinking about creating that safe space for those kids in that moment. Yeah, but also obviously, you know, it's a really scary, hard setting, and I feel like I never had that experience as a kid, but I feel like I could relate to like the having to call a scary setting your home. You know?
I think it's really interesting too with just kind of your encaustic paintings in general. There's a piece in particular over there with the little guy in the center with the eyeball and kind of the strings and strands going around it. When I get up close, to me, it almost looks as if it's like thin skin as you age, right? And all of those bruises and things that might be underneath that skin, deep level, and yet there's still kind of this like happy guy in the center. You know, it's really interesting in a lot of your work. There's, for me at least, when I see is this like repeat pattern of holding joy and holding grief consistently throughout a lot of your pieces.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I also, something I've struggled with that isn't super important to my work, but so I struggle with like picking my skin a lot and having that be the way that I process anxiety and like trauma held in my body. And yeah, I think, and I think you and I talk a lot about how like, you know, I can be doing that in a moment where I'm really happy or doing good, but I'm still doing that act.
Yeah.
And I think about that sort of contrast in stuff a lot where, yeah, like it is this sort of very heavy, like it sort of bruised bodily thing. But, you know, there's so much light in this too that can come out of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this kind of like consistent air of like hope. You know, hope that things will be better, whether soon or later. Things that will change, all that good stuff. And I think it's really good to see. I kind of wanted to jump back to your dollhouse in particular, because this piece is very elaborate in all of the pieces that you've added to it over the time. Can we talk a little bit more about what inspired you to start this dollhouse and what your plans are in the future for the dollhouse?
Well, when I initially started it, I didn't know that I was going to put a piece of foam in there. That came very shortly after, but because of the art that I do and the things that I include in it, people often give me weird little things that they don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
That,
You're a collector of funny, weird little things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like maybe it meant to something to them, maybe it didn't, but I think the act of them giving it to me makes it mean something. And there was so many things that I sort of just like held on to that I didn't have a piece to realize with them. But I also just the fact that the person gave them to me, and maybe it was somebody that I didn't know any longer, or didn't ever really know that well, so they weren't still in my life, or it was somebody that I like really loved and they threw me, and I just didn't want to like part with the thing of it. So I sort of just started adding them to this thing, and then when I found the piece of bone, or not found it, when I got the piece of bone from my ashes, I thought that was like sort of really like beautiful image of like um, sort of bearing that negativity and all of this goodness. And I also, one day I kind of, when I have the space, I want to like add on to it and make this whole like city of it, so that it's just like so lost and all of that.
Gotcha.
stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it would need to be in a, would you want it to be in a more like stationary place where it wouldn't be moved
Oh, I
yet?
think we're because that thing's not in him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much, you know, I'm a '90s kid, and so I grew up with I Spy, and I feel like every time I look into it, I find something I haven't seen before. Yeah, it's once again kind of going back to those like similar themes of like you have this kind of grief totem that's hidden inside, but it's you have all of this beautiful creativity and wonderfulness that you still are able to put on top and keep building your life past, and it almost becomes beyond that, you know, which I think is really interesting, very admirable.
Well, and I like that you could, I mean, obviously the title gives it away, but I like that you could look at it and not know. I think that's also an interesting thought, an interesting image, because I put it in a place where it's like, it's not the star of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost can kind of make you think like you titled it in such a way where people might take the time to try and find it, but yet overlook all the other kind of cool stuff that's in there. So it's always this kind of game of like, are you going to take in all the other things that are around
Yeah.
versus like looking for this one particular thing. That's really interesting. Looking at your art, you express yourself in many mediums. Can you talk more about the shift between some of your early abject kind of horror-themed sculptures and the more colorful work that we see today? Since the show, we have a lot of stuff from your earlier days, and now kind of a shift of the newer stuff.
Yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about more recently, where I think I'm just happier. And I think that I've gone farther from the feelings I had at the time when I made the more abject stuff. And I think I also wanted, I feel like at that time it was like more screaming it.
Yeah.
And now it's like more what I'm thinking about now and sort of like having those things live side by side.
Yeah. Do you think, because even in some of your earlier work, your later work, there's still, it's just almost like how you express the heaviness is different. You know, like you might see a piece where there's some maybe heaviness to it, but it doesn't feel so like how you said, kind of like in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of more like holding hands with that joy, rather than like that's just kind of like the forefront of it. Would you say like that's kind of more of a shift? Or?
Yeah, totally. And I think it was a conscious choice too. Like I got tired of making such heavy stuff, and also putting solely such heavy stuff out in the world, because it sort of brewed just a negative conversation, and like just those harsh feelings, which I think is also an interesting conversation. And like, because I was trying to, even with the abject stuff, I was still trying to, I think, say generally the same thing, but because it was so dark and so heavy and so bodily and gory, it made people's minds sort of go down one path, which was, I think, just sort of ran its course too.
And then, you know, for folks who don't know, there was a period in your life where you went to the
the Chicago Art Institute, and there you were making a lot of abject sculpture work, correct? Yeah. How was that experience like being in that academic setting, having to kind of like crank out that such heavy, intimate, vulnerable work?
I didn't like it. It was, well, it was just hard because, yeah, it was like you had to produce a piece so quickly, but it was also expected for you to like put that emotion and that concept into it. And I felt like that sort of like directly went against what I wanted to do with my art and the things I wanted people to get from it. And it also was just like pretty heartbreaking to make the thing and put so much love and feeling into it, and then not have a place to put it, or not have a place to show it.
Yeah. Would you say like conversations around your art more in this like community setting versus like an academic setting? Would you say that there's more space to kind of like understand a little bit more about what
Oh,
you're
totally.
doing?
Well, that was also the thing. Is like I think in a setting like this, where like you intimately know the people that like come to the space to see it,
Yeah.
and it's an open space for anybody to come into. Those are the people and the environment that I want to see my art, because I think those are the people that can relate to it. Whereas like at an art institution like SAIC, as cool as it is, it's such a vacuum that's can end up being very like snooty, and I think that pulls away from the more intimate, personal part of it, and that's not where I wanted to go.
Yeah. It sounds like maybe it's less of like a critique and more of like a how people can see themselves in your own work.
Yeah.
To kind of circle back a little bit, what would you say, because you use a lot of different mediums, what would you say what medium or theme is what kind of ties a lot of your work together?
These kind of childhood,
Yeah.
trauma in the body, and I think the connecting theme between all of them is like parents and secondhand things being like either fully transformed or incorporated into a thing. Like even like the more abstract like sculpture things are all like found objects or materials that are like turned into a thing. And I think that's also really important in my stuff, is like having a thing that already has had a life and holds a certain amount of feeling, whether it's like really mundane or really heavy. Like the piece that has those like crocheted flowers draped over it.
Yeah.
It's an old sock of mine and some old tights of mine that have like been transformed into that. And I feel like that's integral to the thing too. That so much like intense, the intense imagery has such a like is made from such a mundane thing.
Yeah.
But then there's like really heavy things like bone.
Well, I think it's really interesting because you would never know that unless you asked. You would never
Well,
know.
and I like playing with that too, where it's again like you would never know unless you asked or you looked at it long enough, or yeah. And I like sometimes fully transforming the thing, sometimes not.
Are you ever like surprised, like if somebody comes up to you and talks about a particular piece and you know the kind of like behind the scenes history, like how that used to be a song, and they say that it made you think of something entirely left field? Are you always kind of like surprised?
On my pleased, I think that that's cool, and I think it's cool that like so much like off shooting ideas and stories and feelings can come from such a simple.
Are there any other mediums that you would like to explore that we don't see with us today? Meaning kind of, you do caustic paintings, you do a lot of doll making in general, sculpture work. Is there other kind of mediums that you'd like to explore that you haven't tried yet?
I really want to do ceramics.
Ceramics.
I don't know what that would look like. But yes, I would really like to do ceramics. It's just not super accessible.
Yeah. Do you have like an idea in mind of what you would like to use the ceramics for? Or you wanted to do that?
No, I think I won't know that until I do it.
Gotcha.
Because it's such a, like, often it's such a, people make ceramic stuff that you can use.
Yeah,
And I like that idea and how it could play into that's functional. How it could play into the stuff that I already think about. But, I don't know what I would end up making if I was to make a functional thing, or if I would, I don't know, make more like limbs or,
Well, I'm sure we would all be really excited to see once you get to play with ceramics. Moving forward, what can we expect seeing you work on in the future? Do you have any new ideas that you're brewing
well,
up
a
up
show
there?
that I've said, I know what you're trying to get. A show that I've said that I want to do, that I just like, I don't know when, if I'll ever do it, but I want to. I really like the idea of having a whole bunch of my dolls and a whole bunch of like more abject bodily sculptures and creating like a whole installation where there's these little scenes where like the dolls are caring for the like gross shit and like bandaging them or like tucking them into bed or like cuddling them or like I don't know what, and like I like the idea of that, and then like having there be like a whole life that you like sort of come in upon, but it's frozen, and when and if I do that, I don't know, but it would be really fun. It's something that I sort of like started to explore at art school. Like I created this installation where it was all of my stuff. And then there was like hints of the like more abject stuff. But I want to create that in that personal environment where you like sort of feel like you're intruding and it's like sort of this intimate caring moment, but it's also sort of like upsetting.
Like you're almost kind of opening up the door on someone's kind of like space and you're like, oh.
Yeah. And it's like really cute and sweet because they're like taking care of it, but it's like really upsetting. I think it would be
Yeah. Would that look like, would you want that to be like in an indoor space or like an outdoor space?
I know it would be an indoor space, just because I haven't figured out a way for a lot of my stuff to like be outside and like so that is something that I would like. It's just hard material wise.
Yeah. Would you, with that idea, have you thought about doing any kind of like performance art within that? Would you want to?
No. You want me to? No. Maybe one day.
I'm a little biased. I'm always kind of push her to try some new stuff.
You're like, I'll get you to say it.
Well, lastly, is there anything that you would like to add, or in particular, any pieces that you would like to talk about that we didn't get to touch on today?
No, I'm not gonna play it.
Yeah? Okay, well, I will turn the floor to the artist, and if anyone has any questions, here is the floor.
So I was wondering what would be things that you've done recently, and then what would be like pieces? See a time frame.
Yes. The oldest piece is this doll, that I think I made at like 5 or 6. And I think the newest piece is this like collagey one just to the left of the shelf. I made that like 6 months ago. But the dollhouse is something that I'm like continually finding stuff for. Like Samantha, who works here at Studio Cafe. Here, I'll show you. Just like when I walked in, this was like hidden in the dollhouse, like right next to the dollhouse, and it'll probably end up in the dollhouse. And so, I'm just randomly finding shit that. Yeah.
So you have a lot of like playful, intentional, vulnerable, like embracing of complexity going on in your work. What kind of headspace are you usually in when you are feeling really inspired? And what kind of things do you want people to take away from your art?
Yeah, I think it is a really specific headspace. That's sort of something that I've thought about a few times because I think I have to be at a really specific. Yeah, it has to be a really specific mood because if I'm not doing well at all, I don't make anything, and if I'm doing really well, I also don't really make anything. So yeah, it's sort of this fine line. Yeah, I don't know. And it's always stuff, and it always has to be a period where I never rarely do I, especially now, do I sit down for like a long period of time to make a thing, unless it's like I also like patch clothing and sew things that are more just like for life, and I sit down and do that for like hours. But if it's a piece like what you see here, it's generally something that I've like added to over a long period of time, and I do it like a couple minutes at a time, and then I, move on to a different thing or go do something else. But I have tried to like manufacture the place that I'm in, and I haven't figured out how to do it. Because I get frustrated with myself where I'll like want to work on stuff, but then I like sit down to do it and I can't for whatever reason. That kind of experience.
Yeah. And then what kind of themes did you want people to take?
I think just like more like softness and like self-compassion and like what's the word? Patience for the like uglier, harsher parts of yourself or of life. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate thing. That's I think a lot of what I think about too. It's like I feel like those are so much of the things that we don't want to like talk about or like interact with about ourselves, or like overlook when we're like walking through life. And so I think that would be the number.
Did you have questions?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for when we do get Birdie ceramics. I could picture
Yeah.
some really cool, like, pots for plants or all different kinds of stuff. I see a lot of, like, repeated images. I see a lot of eyes, and I see a lot of swirls, which I also really love. What appeals to you about some of, like, the swirls, the eyes, like some of the repeated things that we see in lots of your pieces?
Well, I have always been really interested in like the swirl image for like I can't ever say the word, but I think it's Ouroboros, like the snake eating itself sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of like about that. I think it's just like a metaphor of the, sort of beating yourself up, destroying yourself sort of thing. I don't know if that's initially what the image was about, but that's what I think of. And then the eyes, I think, I talked a little bit about that in the article, but I think that it's just a really good symbol of like reflection and like perspective and So I think that's often when I'm sort of trying to symbolize what on your hand. Yeah.
So you used to sign.
Yeah, I used to sign my art with yeah, that's
Nice.
some of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all can decide.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece here? Like,
I don't know if it's my favorite, but one of my favorite is the one with the sort of spotty frame. That one has a little note that my little brother wrote in it. And I think that that's really special. And the one below it has the eyes in it that were a gift from my best friend Noah. And that one feels really special to me. Yeah. But I'm also really partial to the ones that I made when I was little because they just feel like they hold so much, like, what's the word? Lore. Because I've had them in my room for so many years. And, they've been there, you know.
Carl, what's your question?
yeah. Well, I'm really like intrigued by the use of wax in these. That's like, especially now when it makes like a skin effect, which we talked about, which is really cool. But also like when you have different layers of things behind it, you can do kind of like collage, but it's like things are fading in the background in a certain way. It makes me kind of think of like memories fading in and out.
Totes, Carl, you got it.
Yeah.
Did you have any other like thoughts about working with it, like practically with like work with wax in that way that didn't speak to any other thing that you're trying to do, like a story or vibe or anything?
Totally. I really like it for that reason. I think like when you put stuff in the layers of wax, it like the wax gives it a level of like nostalgia and like memory that maybe the object didn't initially evoke. And also like since it is layers and layers of wax, you literally like get that sort of visual history too. But I also, in recent years, have been like trying to be more conscious of the materials that I use and like where they come from, and like not putting more toxic crap out into the world. And then caustic painting is a really fun way to do that because it is just beeswax and like, I mean it's beeswax and damar resin, which is a tree resin, but it's a more natural material that creates that sort of skin effect, and it also can create that more nostalgic like memory effect. Yeah, so
Do we have any other questions?
You responded to a couple questions already, and just like the nature of art and processing a lot of different events or memories. And in one, you were kind of answering if there was anything specific that associated to specific artworks of yours. But do you ever feel that like some of your pieces are a jumbling of like a lot of different influences kind of all
yeah.
coming together?
Yeah, which I think can be intentional, but also maybe it's just like a result of like not getting to the core yet of whatever that is that I'm thinking about necessarily. Yeah.
This is more of a comment than a question, but I really like how your art is. I feel like a lot of people will kind of like try to replicate different things. It feels very like this is coming from like a very authentic place. I think it's also cool that you use so many things from people that like they handed to you or that you care about or have a connection to, because I feel like it kind of gives like a lot of meaning to the I love you more than you know, because you kept the thing, you made art from the thing, and now it's like a new thing, and it just seems like a really special way to appreciate things. So I just really appreciate like just how like personal and authentic this whole thing is. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
So I noticed that a few of the different pieces have like fabric pieces or crochet connecting between them? Is it the reason they're connected to go together, or just for part of the aesthetic?
Well, I've always liked like intestine imagery.
No sense.
And like, yeah, I guess how that can like visually connect to thing, but also like the sort of nodding and like loopiness of it can really evoke a feeling. The them being draped over things specifically, it's not like those two things are connected.